Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session, the Scrum Pulse session, which is about how Peter Senge's 5 disciplines of learning organizations can help your organization be nimble. Excuse me. My name is Patricia Kahn. I am actually going to be moderating this session. I'm substituting in for Ravi Verma, but really excited to have this conversation. What we have today for you is really a panel discussion. So we're going to be going through the book and the 5 disciplines with 3 of my colleagues, Kurt Bittner, Stacy Martin, and Nagesh Sharma. They're 3 really fantastic people who can talk about how these disciplines relate back to their own experience, but also to a big topic that we've been discussing in general, which is about learning, and also another topic, which is about scaling. So while people are getting logged in, just some quick guidelines. Your microphones are going to be muted throughout, but we really want to make this an engaging session. So because it's a panel session, I'll be asking our 3 panelists some different questions, but I want you to also chime in, and I'll try to bring in those questions as best as I can. So you have a question box field on the right side, hopefully, of your screen. You can type questions in there and also some different comments. You can also tweet your questions at Scrum.org or hashtag ScrumPulse. We have somebody else who's moderating this, Lindsay, in the background. So she'll let us know if anything comes up too. So just a little bit before we get started about Scrum.org. Scrum.org is the home of Scrum, and we're a mission-based company. Improving the profession of software delivery is what we're focused on. And just in general about Scrum.org, it's a free webinar by Scrum.org with unifying themes. So there's going to be a lot of different conversations like this, which is a conversation around one particular topic, but also, you know, for instance, presentations around, I've done some around Nexus, we've talked about multicultural teams, we've talked about women in tech. There's a lot of different things out there that we present out to you. So if you like, you can also visit previous Scrum Pulses that we've conducted on our website. So we are always looking forward also for your recommendations. So feel free to contact us using Twitter at Scrum.org if you have some future sessions. So let's get to it. Again, my name is Patricia Kong. I work at Scrum.org. I've been here for over 6 or 7 years. And it's not really about me today, but I work in our enterprise solutions very closely with Kurt Bittner. I'm going to pass it along. I'm going to ask each of you guys to introduce yourself, maybe just a little bit about your background, what you're doing now for work, and how about what city you're in right now, which will help us drive kind of this global conversation. Go ahead, Stace.
Hello, my name is Stacy Martin. I'm currently in Columbus, Ohio, which you see here behind me. I started working with Agile methods in 2004 with Progressive Insurance. I joined the trainer community in 2012, where, as Patricia stated, I'm helping improve the profession of software delivery with this great community. And I'm currently working with an organization called Cover My Meds. We help patients get the medications they need to live healthy lives through automation of the prior authorization process. So I'm really happy to join you today.
Thanks, Stacy. Kurt.
Yeah, well, Patricia mentioned that we work together at Scrum.org, and we work on various enterprise-related topics. And so that involves, we've been doing a lot of work on measurement lately. We've also been working on Nexus. Along with Dave West, we wrote a book on Nexus. So my background goes a long way back with Agile and things like Agile. I've also spent some time leading product organizations and spent some time as an industry analyst. So, you know, I don't know if that's jack of all trades, but done a lot of different things.
And where are you, Kurt? What city are you in?
Oh, yeah, I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Lucky you. Thank you.
And I don't have the view that Stacy does, but look at the office.
Nagesh.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nagesh Sharma, and my association with Agile is now close to 10 years. And I worked in different industries, large enterprises, small firms, in different roles like Scrum Masters, product owner. And I'm very privileged to be part of the Scrum.org community as well. And I'm currently in the heart of India, Chhattisgarh, but I basically belong to the southern portion of India, Bangalore. And what else? Currently, I'm running a company in India, Flowsphere. I'm currently the CEO of this company. And what do we offer? We offer creating lean, agile transformations for the large enterprises, small enterprises, medium firms. So the goal is to create more responsive organizations. That's pretty much our goal.
Thank you, Nagesh. And I realize that it's a bit late for you, so I appreciate you. I appreciate you participating in our panel today. So again, we're here to talk about the book, The Fifth Discipline, and just to give you a little bit of background. So we have a relationship with the community where we're always trying to learn, right? It's one of the things that, you know, the people who become professional Scrum trainers or who are generally in this community are excited about. So we actually have this kind of book club that, that Ravi Verma started. And one of the books that we were reading is The Fifth Discipline. And so I actually have, I don't know, almost 10 to 15 years in organizational behavior background. So this is something that, this is a book that, you know, you listen to multiple times or you've read it multiple times. But just to give you a little bit of background, according to Wikipedia, so it was written in 1990 by Peter Senge, and I don't know, maybe that's before some of you were born, but the book focuses on group problem solving using systems thinking to convert companies into learning organizations. So what Peter Senge does in the book is he goes through 5 disciplines that he talks about to help create a learning organization. And the 5 disciplines are personal mastery, mental models, shared vision, team learning, and systems thinking. So we're going to go through those. We're going to be asking the panelists, they've all, you know, selected a discipline that's close to them, that they're passionate about. They're going to give a brief explanation of what it means to them, how they've seen it in practice. And then at that point, I'm going to encourage you guys, the listener, to type in some questions. I'll also be asking them questions back to the panelists. And so we're just going to engage in a conversation that way. So rather than them presenting to us what they think and what the discipline is, we're going to have a conversation about it, right? So we can learn something even more. But let's get started with the poll. So the first poll, we have 3 today. I'm just wondering, are you guys familiar with the book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge? Very simple, yes or no. And Lindsay, if you could just get started, that would be great. So it's coming up, and it looks like most people are not familiar with the 5th discipline. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation, and if it's interesting, hopefully you guys can read about it, and then maybe even just participate back in the blog with us, in our forums with us. So let's get started with the first one. The first one is around personal mastery. And you can see the definition here, but I'm going to ask Stacy just briefly, can you just explain what personal mastery is, and then maybe what it means to you, how you've seen it, why you chose it as the discipline, one of the disciplines you'd like to talk about today?
Yes, for sure. So you see our little bit of a definition there, and some of the key points in that definition that stand out are having a personal vision, having some sort of focused energy or focused motivation around that specific personal vision, and then also having an appreciation for where you are now or current reality. So those 3 elements stand out when I think about personal mastery. And one piece that has been interesting me more lately is the piece around mastery and understanding mastery. So I think we sometimes have a tendency to want to pull ourselves out of the mindset of being specialized or having one specific focus point as an individual. Expertise somehow sometimes gets a bad rap. But I think there can be some really good energetic discipline and passion around having a specific craft that you consider your own. So mastering a craft and being really absorbed and good at something and feeling proud at bringing other people along on that journey with you. So I like to think of personal mastery in terms of what would those things that I say I'm a craftsman of, what are those things that are really important to me, that are the things that follow me along in my career, and regardless of my role, regardless of the team context, what are those things that I uniquely bring and use my own defined discipline to accentuate and help me to coach teams and bring teams along. Mm-hmm. What are some thoughts that you guys have on that?
Well, I find this, so this is really about, maybe you wanted to, if you could describe it, like being T-shaped, right? We hear that a lot. Are you saying that for you, personal mastery is saying, hey, you know what, we should encourage and celebrate this in teams, that people can go and, figure out and decide what is that thing that they're excellent at and just pursue that? Is that something that you think from a scaling context that they should be bringing back to share, or is this really about the individual?
Yeah, I think people who know me know I talk a lot about pendulum swings, and I think it's easy for us to start to get in the thought that everyone should be well-rounded and we should have these, we even call them comb-shaped individuals sometimes, because you want to have all these longer spikes that accentuate a more holistic vision of what you're good at. But it's natural to have some things that you're really passionate about and some things that you are kind of taking the lead on. And I think that that's an okay thing as well. And it's good to understand that and share that passion with your team members so that they can have an appreciation and start to understand how to craft their personal vision around the motivation that you have on your particular craftsman piece, but then things that they can learn from that to add to their comb-shaped person skills.
Yeah, I've heard it called pie shape too. So then let me ask you this, and I'm lucky enough to know Stacy pretty well, but I think I know the answer, but what do you think is the stem in your T shape? And I'm going to ask Nagesh, you and Kurt also.
Yeah, so mine is, and you're going to hear this when I talk about team learning as well, is it's getting things out on the table. So working with teams in a way that they're comfortable becoming like family and sharing things in a way where they're very open, they're joking, they call out each other's faults, they have that rapport to be really comfortable and dynamic together, so that delivery doesn't become this regimented thing. It becomes something that's fun and that everyone can feel some ownership in and kind of work as a family to deliver software.
Thanks. Hey, Nagesh, what do you think your personal vision is? The stem in your T.
Sure. So, thank you. So, I truly believe that nobody has achieved peak performance in comfort zone. And in order to achieve excellence, or in order to achieve the personal mastery, people have to move outside the comfort zone. That means and my belief is a lot on challenging coaching, where I respect people and respectfully I challenge them on their skills. And we have also seen that in order to have people in their flow state so that they can achieve the flow state, their skills needs to be challenged. And the beauty of the Nexus framework is that, and of course, in that way, basics is Scrum, that it is built upon built-in instability. That means that you got boundaries, you have autonomy, and then it is like going to the first floor, breaking the ladder, innovate or die, right? So, but then you've got to choose the how part. So my personal mission or my personality is that, so bring out best of the people by challenging, respectfully, of course.
Respectfully, thank you. And just for those who don't know, the Nexus framework is actually scaling Scrum, the scaled Scrum framework that we talk about at Scrum.org, which we can get into later, or obviously there are other Scrum pulses about it. Kurt, what about you? What do you think your personal mastery is?
So I think it's varied over time. and it tends to be very situationally driven. So, you know, Trisha's known me for a long time too. And, you know, I have a really broad set of interests, but when working on a particular problem, I find it's a really good habit to just really become almost obsessive about learning about that particular problem. If you're working on a team, as a team, learning about that problem and getting really deeply into it. So as an example, or very early in my career, I was working on building systems to support essentially financial management systems. And so working with in a sense, the stakeholders, you know, I made it part of my challenge to become as much of an expert on the problem as they were, so that we could speak the same language and we could talk about solutions instead of talking about technology. And then I would take that back and I would, you know, also at that time obsessively focus on the code that was necessary to deliver that. So I think it's the thing that really stands out for me in this personal mastery is the focusing our energies part, and just really become kind of obsessive about really understanding the problem and then really understanding how you're solving that problem. And it's going to vary over time. The other interesting thing about, so something you mentioned, Stacy, that sort of triggered a thought in my mind is that technology changes all the time, but the business problems don't change really. I mean, they change really slowly. And so in part of being that sort of T-shaped or cone-shaped or pie-shaped or whatever shape we're talking about, you have to constantly be refreshing the stuff that you're deep in, because that stuff ages pretty rapidly. Not so much the things that you know, the coaching kinds of things that Nagesh and Stacy were talking about, but certainly technology things, you know, change every 3 to 5 years. The business problem things change probably more on 10-year cycles. But really, you know, whenever you're trying to solve a particular problem, being really obsessive about, you know, about really understanding the problem and not just letting other people's definition of the problem sort of shape your thinking, but, you know, get into it yourself, ask why a lot. And so I think that in a sense, personal mastery means constantly reinventing yourself to solve the problems that are in front of you, and preparing yourself to solve the problems that are a little farther down the road.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because when, and I'll talk about a couple things. So yesterday I was at a conference, and I asked them to consider what the 5 Scrum values are, which are focus, openness, respect, courage, commitment, right? So I tend to do this at different conferences and ask them, what Scrum value are you struggling with today? Or what Scrum value, what's your preferred Scrum value? What speaks to you? And I participate also. And what I find is that it changes, right? And it changes on the situation, and we can certainly have our interests. And also, I think thinking about personal mastery, you'll start to uncover a lot about yourself, but also new things that can come your way. So a really good question that came in through the chat is, if a person doesn't know their personal mastery, how do they uncover it? And that's a really big question. And yesterday at the same conference, I was at a talk, and it was a talk about, you know, how to succeed as an introvert, right? Like, how do you know when you just like to keep your head down? And she asked a really great question, just something to reflect on, which I think is always important, right? And a big part of it is just to do some reflection. But the thing that she asked is, hey, what did you want to be when you were a kid? And where do you feel most happy and most safe? And hers was that she wanted to be a writer, and that she felt most comfortable at home. And so what has she been doing throughout her career maybe to encourage that? And, you know, did that align? And when I was thinking about that, mine was to be an FBI agent, and I don't know how that relates to my career or my personal mastery, but I'm very resourceful, and I'm very this, and I'm very that. So that's interesting. Do you guys, maybe Stacy, do you know how somebody might try to uncover their personal mastery?
Yeah, I think thinking about your personal optimizing goal, and that sounds big, but when I say that, I mean, what is your true motivation for your profession or what you're doing as being your career. So what is the, when you really look at everything you consider when you consider taking a position or why you work, what is the main thing that stands out to you? And if it could be something like helping people or a passion for technology. And if you can identify that thing, you can start to see it in your past and in your current reality, like how it shows itself. And then you can start to break that down into what next steps you take to reinforce that optimizing goal. In our, we teach some classes that talk about personal mastery, and even though I was just kind of talking about identifying your vision, once you have that vision identified, you need to keep focus on it, but also be very rooted in the present and the current reality. And when you're doing that, there's always this tension that happens because you think about how helpless you are, the things that kind of pull you away from that vision. In the book is a rubber band exercise. But the important part of that is having some sort of creative motivation that keeps you pulled towards that vision from your current reality. If you think of it as rubber bands, that's why I'm doing this with my hands. There's a creative tension that's between there. And if you are able to identify your personal optimizing goal, it can start to drive you towards that vision because you're passionate, and that passion drives you.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm going to ask one more question, maybe Kurt, because we need to get to the 4 more disciplines. Kurt, why do you think personal mastery is one of the disciplines? Why is this relevant to an organization that wants to become a learning organization, or even just thinking about it in a scaled context? Why is this there?
Well, I think it's foundational to doing everything else. You can't really have an effective, high-performing team unless everybody basically has, to use the expression, has their head in the game. They have to really be committed to being excellent themselves, and then being excellent together to achieve the kinds of things that the other disciplines talk about. So it's if everybody is just sort of floating along, kind of accepting, sort of being very passive, I guess, then you're not going to have that creative tension where people are sort of challenging each other and pushing each other. So I think personal mastery is the thing upon which everything else is built.
Well, then let's get into the next one, right? Because we're going to be able to wipe out some assumptions. Let's talk about mental models, Kurt.
Yeah. So as we did before, the definition of mental models is here on the screen. And what I find is that we all have a picture of how the world works. And that picture of how the world works, and in a sense, how people behave and all that, really shapes everything we think about the world. And so in a sense, that's our mental model. So we have a lot of, when we're trying to come together as a team and work, basically perform better, to achieve better results, a lot of times our mental models stand in the way of that, or they enhance it. So to give you an example of how it stands in the way. So one of the central mental models behind waterfall thinking is the idea that teams can't be responsible for making their own plans, that they have to have somebody else who's much smarter than them make the plans for them, and then they can execute on that. And if your organization or you as an individual embrace that, if you don't think teams can really be effective at planning their own work and really even understanding what the problem is, then you're going to be held back. You're always going to be believing that we need to have some smarter person than ourselves come in and help us do this. Or if your organization believes that, they're never going to empower the team to do that. So so that's one mental model. Another mental model that managers might have is that if everybody is as busy as possible, they're going to get the most out of them. And so, utilization is a good thing. Well, utilization actually is the enemy of better throughput. But if you have that mental model, you're going to have difficulty really making the changes that you need to make. So I think these mental models, these preconceptions about how the world works and how it is, actually limit our ability to see the world as it really is and then adapt in the sense, we use this phrase all the time, inspect and adapt on our situation to improve it. So I think mental models are this sort of barrier that you have to overcome, or potentially if you have a better mental model, it's a goal toward which you can work.
I love that, because even when you think about, I don't know, just outside of the professional environment, how people can operate in bubbles, right? And how, even in the United States, when we talk about politics, people are in certain mental models, people are in certain areas where what we're trying to do is what you should be doing is to looking at different perspectives and different conversations. So what I've been talking about a lot and exploring is just the psychological behavior of how, no matter where you are, no matter if you're an agile coach or if you're a senior leader, a manager in an organization, you've gotten there by behaving a certain way or doing certain things. And that's built up what we can call here a mental model. And what they say is that that's hard to change, right? Like, it's part of your brain that's ingrained in you. And so that might mean, as an agile coach, you're hearing the same stories and you're just kind of blacking out, not paying attention. As a manager, people are talking about wanting to work in a different way. You're saying, this, I know what works because I'm the boss and I have power. And that power actually wipes it away. So it's about exploring other things. So Kurt, since we talk about Nexus a lot, or even just scaling, what do you think is the relevance of a mental model in a scaled initiative, in a scaled organization?
Well, it's a couple of different things. I think first that, this idea of complexity and sort of, the complexity of trying to get work done with multiple teams. So, people might have the mental model that, well, that's really complicated, that it would just be too chaotic for teams to work together to figure out how they best balance the work and share the work. So we need to have sort of a big centralized planning to figure out which team does what work. So a different mental model, and the one that's embedded in this, is to say that, the people closest to the work are the ones who are best able to figure out what the dependencies are and how to share the work between teams and how to resolve various conflicts and dependencies. And so that fundamental belief that the people closest to the work are best able to make the decisions is really fundamental to not just Nexus, but Scrum. Nexus takes that to a new level, because it says that not only is a team closest to the work, but there are multiple teams closest to different kinds of work, and but together they're best able to come together and figure out how to do that work. And that idea that there's somebody who could centrally plan it, who's farther away from the work than the team, is just really a flawed mental model. And so, but it takes time, and it takes sometimes actually doing it and showing that it can work for people to believe that you don't have to centrally plan to have a large number of people working together to get things done.
One of the things that I've seen with different Nexus implementations is really the notion of forming that identity, and we can work in these ways. And yes, we're a Nexus now, so we're in a scaled situation, but we have these teams, and these teams are comprised of individuals. I want to move on to the next discipline, which is building a shared vision. One of the things that has helped teams succeed in a Nexus is because it's helped them build a shared vision, especially with not only the identity that we've been kind of exploring, but also with the notion of working toward a Nexus goal. And it should be broader than that, right? So we're talking about systems. So somebody came in through the chat and talked about, according to entrepreneur.com, the top dream place for Gen Zers to work is St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. And the second is Google. And there's not more than that in the chat, but what I'm envisioning or what I'm taking from that is even why any of us are with Scrum.org is because we believe in a mission, right? And the mission is improving the profession of software delivery. We're working toward that vision. Can you talk a little bit more, Kurt, about just building a shared vision and what that might mean to you and what you've seen from your experience?
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion in sort of most organizations about vision. And the way vision usually works, sort of tacking onto that mental model idea, is that there's somebody at the top and they've got this big vision for the organization, and there's a super smart product person and they've got this vision for the product. And then, they communicate that out to people. And so sometimes when people think about this idea of building a shared vision, they think it's that it's sort of coming from somebody who's got all the ideas and coming out to the team and in communicating the vision out. And what we mean here is something very different. Is that those people are certainly part of the discussion, but it's the team coming to a shared understanding about what it is, what problem they're solving, who experiences those problems, how do the problems manifest themselves, what are we going to do to solve those problems, how are we going to measure ourselves as to whether we solve the problems. And so it's a collective thing because, and it's a really interesting exercise because people, when you're running a workshop to build a shared vision, or you bring a group of people together, everybody's asking different questions, and that helps to unearth different aspects of the vision that's really positive. It really starts to bring things out. So it's not a top-down thing of communicating the vision out, but it's rather coming together and getting that shared perspective, because everybody, in the end, everybody's going to contribute to the solution. So everybody needs to really understand the problem and sort of come to sort of grasp it and embrace it. So I think it's the shared part of it, the shared word is really the important part. It's not communicating the vision, it's together, working together to build this shared thing that then you're going to go off and do something really interesting with. So that's what it means for me.
Stacey,
I'd like to add.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do either of you have, I'm sorry, I can't see your camera, so I don't know if you're raising your hand or anything. Lack of technology on my part. I would just actually really want to understand, and please add to this, but have you guys seen this failed where there wasn't a shared vision in your own experience?
Yeah, I had a short personal story, very short, which I wanted to share listening to the insights shared by Kurt right now. So I was consulting a company in which there were multiple teams, like 10 teams working together on one product, and they were having their own small goals or objectives which we were trying to follow, and they were trying to work towards, but unfortunately they lacked an alignment. So whenever they were coming for the sprint reviews and the stakeholders were attending their sprint reviews, and they were seeing how the system is incrementing now, and unfortunately they were not able to see collectively how their work is becoming integrated. So one of the things what we have identified while we did the root cause analysis was that these guys lack a vision. They do not have shared vision, right? And then the way we tried to solve was, one of the inspirations we got from the framework was having everybody coming together and have an overarching goal like the Nexus sprint goal, which helps other teams to create smaller goals, right? So that you have, each team has a sprint goal, and then there is an overarching goal which is guiding everyone like a lighthouse. So that was one of the most powerful things I think which we have done, so that everybody understands what's the vision. One more lesson which I learned was, having a shared vision is not enough. That vision has to be communicated to people 10x times, again and again and again and again. So I would say that, like we say about Agile is about delivering value early and often. Like, how do you have a solid vision? By communicating it early and often. So that's something which I wanted to share.
Thank you. Stace, have you seen maybe some challenges where there wasn't a shared vision also?
Yes, so I wanted to highlight that the framework, both Nexus and Scrum, almost assume that there's a shared vision as the teams use the framework. So the framework's going to help the teams organize and work as a collective. And you can see in the artifacts and events, one product backlog, one sprint planning with a couple parts, one review, one increment. You hear one a lot, which is accentuating the fact that you're building that increment based on a shared vision. And if teams don't have that and they try to execute around the framework or within the framework, they will scream and they will thrash and they will have difficulties. And several teams that I've worked with will clamor for the vision. We need a vision. We don't understand the vision. Someone give us the vision, because they're being asked to deliver something without the general context. And I try to work with teams, or I've learned to try to work with teams to start to capture that on their own. So instead of asking for, we need this so that we can go away and do this, it's help us understand how we can start to gather pieces of that vision and make it something that we want and should be building. Getting really close to the customer is a good example of that. So observing the customer in their environment as they encounter pains, and then the team working through how to address those pains. Kurt kind of described that when he said, attacking things from the problem space. Because if we just look at our teams to execute within a framework to deliver something, we're missing the point. The point is to let them come to that shared vision by observing the customer pain and then allowing the framework to help them deliver.
Thanks. And that kind of hits on, there's a question that came in, so feel free, anyone, to add to this. So the question that came in, or just a statement, it's when you say collective shared vision, do you mean having everyone, so like the entire Nexus, and I think you talked about this, or is it really the leadership coming together and saying, here's a vision for our company, and what do you guys think that means for you guys as individual teams? Because a lot of organizations say it might be nice, but we don't have that luxury of letting the teams come to it. So do you guys have any comments about that? How else would you actually add to that?
There's a couple things. So, when you're talking about a company vision, there are things that the team might see in terms of their interactions with customers that create opportunities. So there might be information flowing up from the team to other levels of executives in the organization that helps to shape the overall shared vision. Oftentimes the best product ideas come from people who are working directly with customers. So there's this risk that executives become isolated in their offices and just when they're just meeting with one another. So they need the information flowing up from teams. There's a certain aspect of company direction. The founder, certainly, if it's a startup, they have a strong vision for where the company's going. But the aspect of it that I think is important with shared is that everybody understands it, helps to contribute to it, and in a sense is motivated by it. So that's the thing Stacy was mentioning when she was talking about that. I thought about experiences where I've seen people have been frustrated because they don't understand what the vision is. It's very demotivating, and it becomes kind of, to use the expression, soul destroying, that you feel like I don't feel like what I'm doing matters. So when people feel like what they do matters, it's incredibly powerful. It's very motivating. People feel like they feel that they want to contribute to achieving that vision when they really take ownership for it. So I think it's more than just getting the vision from the outside or getting it from the top down, even if it's a company vision. And that's where it gets a little difficult. If you're working in a big multinational corporation with lots of different products, it's hard to connect with the company vision, but you can certainly connect with the product vision of what you're working on.
Thanks. Okay, we're running a little bit tighter on time, so we're going to move on. I just want to respond to a question that came in. And it sometimes, communicating might not be enough is the opinion that was stated in the chat about vision. And even for instance at Scrum.org, how do we do that? That is not just about money, and that it is about a vision. And I think it's about really stating that outcome and seeing if people believe in that. So very much so when I'm doing something or we're researching something or doing some work at Scrum.org, Ken Schwaber would routinely ask me, if I was trying to make a lot of money, that might be great, but if I was trying to improve the profession of software delivery, what would I do? And so routinely going through that and having me think about those outcomes, and then even if, Kurt said we think a lot about measurement, how would you break that down and measure and look at that to see if you were really doing it, right? How are you actually measuring the success of your vision becomes really interesting. So let's move on to team learning. I think this was Kurt, you, or Stacy? Stacy.
Hopping in. So, and I feel like we were bleeding into this one a little bit because we're talking a lot about teams already. So maybe this will tell us to go on track. But team learning is really figuring out how to transmit the knowledge that the team has throughout the team. So I like that the caption here says throughout, because it's something that should flow. It's not, as we said, coming down into the team from above. It's the team taking the execution of their personal mastery pieces and their personal vision and using that to learn as a group. When I was reading the book, a piece that always stands out to me is teams really being clear on when using precise language and then explaining what they mean when they say something. So by that I mean saying what you see and what you experience in a collective group so that you can dissect that together and create alignment. So I was recently in London, and when you're traveling on the tube, there are a lot of signs that see it, say it, sort it. And we were kind of laughing because it applies to our work as well. And when you are going to observe something as an individual, and when you express your thoughts on that, you're starting to shape the way you look at it, but then the way your collective team looks at it as well. And if you can get into the habit where you have a team that is really engaging together and talking through those things, they can start to align on topics and start to kind of gel as a group. So that was one, I guess, a little bit of a tool for learning is stopping teams and saying, like, what do you mean when you say vision? Vision's a good example. What do we mean when we say vision? What do we want? What are we asking for? How do we get to it? And really dissecting it with precise language instead of just saying we're missing vision and, kind of repeating that mantra over without analyzing it.
What do you think then is one of the biggest challenges to team learning? Like, what can break that?
Personally, I've seen in organizations desire to efficiently deliver. So to work harder, faster, just get moving. I think that can cause us to act instead of stepping back and really analyzing and talking through what the appropriate action is and what it means to us as a team.
This segues beautifully into systems thinking, Nagesh, right? Because we're not lifting it up a level in thinking. Nagesh, what is systems thinking per this definition, and what does it mean to you? Where have you seen it done well?
Wow. So system thinking, what it means to me, I would say if I have to define systems thinking in very short, I would say look into the bigger picture, right? And I'm a big fan of also Deming, and it says that if a system needs to be managed, leaving unattended, the individual components become selfish. So one of the things which I've seen is that in the organization, value often flows through interconnecting parts, and an organization is a huge system. And if you don't understand the interrelatedness between the systems, between the small components of the parts, then often if we are trying to solve a problem, we create bigger solutions. Like Stacy just said, that managers or the organizations focusing on 100% resource utilization, and that is an economic disaster, because focusing more on efficiency and moving away from effectiveness. So sometimes we are making a trade-off for quality. So that's what I've seen a lot of times in organizations.
And that's why, for instance, in the Nexus Framework, we have a lot of these, the additional things that we've added, right? So for instance, even when you think of the Nexus Daily Scrum, and why does it come before the Daily Scrums? It's there because we have to think about what we need to do as a system, as a Nexus, before we go and put our heads down into our individual teams, because otherwise we're not optimizing for the whole, right? Do you see any other parts of Nexus, Nagesh, that are like that point to embracing systems thinking?
Absolutely. I mean, I see a lot of opportunities which Nexus provides. One of the great opportunities is also Nexus sprint planning, where appropriate members from the different teams come together and they get guidance from the Nexus sprint goal. And there is a Nexus sprint backlog from where the work comes for all the teams. So that gives people a holistic view. What are we trying to build, right? What is our overall goal? Similarly, Nexus Sprint Review is another opportunity which provides the real progress of how your system is incrementing, where otherwise, where the appropriate members again come together, and then you see how the integrated increment is shaping. So these two things definitely are great examples which Nexus provides, which embraces systems thinking.
And I would add actually the Nexus Integration Team too, because ideally those are people who are actually from the teams. So if you have 60 people, 100 people, you're getting those voices from the whole that can be represented throughout. For systems thinking, Stacy talked about London. That made me think about, I was in Hong Kong recently, and Hong Kong is a very, very diverse population. There's some refugees there. And there was a really great story I saw yesterday, and I saw this when I was there, but Anthony Bourdain was there in Hong Kong, and he showed this couple. It was, I guess, a Chinese woman and an African man, and they were saying there are a lot of African refugees here. They don't have money, but what could we do to help them, because they're struggling. They're like in between, right? And essentially it was saying one of the things we can do is explore how to make them feel at home. One of the ways you can really do that is by having food, right? Your cuisine, your culture. And the problem is that they wouldn't be able to, first of all, serve the people because they didn't have money to pay, but also because there's just a lot of different food. So what did they do? They actually just opened a kitchen. So these people could come and just cook their own food in the kitchen. And that was really, I think, a great way to kind of show systems thinking of, what can we do to serve the whole rather than just one really particular solution. So we just went through the 5 disciplines, and we have a couple polls, and then I want to get into some more general discussion, like, do we think this actually is a thing? Do we think this works? Is this relevant? There's always pros and cons to different ideas. And also, this was written in the 90s. Is it still relevant now? So start to think about those things, but let's get a poll up in place. So the second poll is, which discipline do you think would help your team the most, right? So here are the 5 again: A, personal mastery; B, mental models; C, building a shared vision; D, team learning; E, systems thinking. If you guys could just, Lindsay can launch the poll and you guys could vote on it, that would be really great feedback for everyone. Are there only 2? Oh, there are the 5. There you go. I somehow lost the poll screen, but I think that, oh, here it is. Shared vision is winning 51%. All right. Let's, hopefully you guys are finished with that one then. Let's move on to the next poll. which discipline do you think is most important in current times within the software development industry? And again, it's the five disciplines. If you could launch that, it'll be interesting to see if you think it's the same as what you voted before. So let's get that launched. And the reason we want to ask this question is because when we started to talk, when we're talking about this in our book club, it was really about, hey, this book was written in the 90s, right? So what does that mean right now, especially when we're talking about software and software delivery? So hopefully you guys are getting your votes in. There you go. I don't see the results. Yes, I see them now. Okay. So shared vision has gone down to 29%. Personal mastery 6%, mental models 14%, team learning 14%, and systems thinking is, I think that says 36%. What do you guys think, panel? What would be your answer to this third question?
I would, so especially in the industry one, I was thinking systems thinking is the one that's most lacking. We're building incredibly complex systems today, and yet we tend to have silos of expertise. So one person's thinking about just server stuff, and the other person's thinking about the mobile app, and another person's thinking about the database, and nobody's thinking about it holistically. And so that's a big piece that I see missing, is that we've either lost or we've never created the holistic view, partly because of technology specialization, but also partly because nobody's looking at that problem. They just look at their own little piece. Yeah.
And would you say that that's relevant just for software development, or would you have the same comment for any industry?
Yeah, I mean, especially the more specialized the knowledge required. So I have a niece who's going and getting a PhD in pharmacology, and that's very specialized, where she's looking at very, very specific kinds of responses, but she doesn't really see the whole patient in the sense that Nagesh was describing in his scenario. So I think it's just a nature of our complex society that we tend to get siloed and think narrowly in terms of thinking more holistically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to also complement what just Kurt said. For me also, I think systems thinking is something which binds the other four disciplines very closely, and helps you also see beyond. It's like in India we have horses, and horses are like chariots, so that horse should not get deviated. What they will do is they'll put like this barrier to the horses, so that they can only see straight, right? So I think many times the organization, we have organizational gravity, and most of the units, sometimes the cost centers, they become so much self-centric. They put like these to the people, and they are just looking into their own small systems. And I think it's time for the managements and organizations to little bit widen that, so that they have a holistic view and provide them a systems view, rather than their own small silos view.
It's really interesting, because sometimes I think the word systems thinking can encourage people to think like large, just very big, and scale. And I like that you guys are bringing it even to thinking about, just the system of the way we work in the world, and the system of, the entire body, because that's a big thing in medicine. One of the things that's interesting is that it says the 5 disciplines or approaches to develop 3 learning capabilities: fostering aspiration, reflecting conversations, and understanding complexity. And I think we've hit a lot on aspiration and reflection. Stacy, how do you think the 5 disciplines help to form that learning capability, which is understanding complexity?
Yep. So, I mean, that piece goes hand in hand with systems thinking. So if you've had exposure to the Ralph Stacey chart, it takes you down that path of understanding how to work in a complex environment. And I think too often we assume we are working in a complicated environment where we can predict the outcome and we think we understand the interactions, but then we're surprised with unknowns. And I think systems thinking with the other disciplines causes us to really face the reality that we're working in a complex environment where we really have to be upfront about the fact that more is unknown than is known, and we need a way to navigate that, a way to embrace it and harness it and kind of step back and really look at the whole system so that we can navigate that complexity.
Do you guys want to add anything to that?
One thing I would add is that a lot of times we look at the complexity of the solution, and if we look at the problem from the customer's perspective, it actually simplifies it. It gives us more of an end-to-end view. So I think coming back, sort of linking systems thinking to shared vision, if our shared vision is more about what are we doing for customers and how are we making their lives better, that tends to make a lot of the complexity go away, and it also tends to remove the blinders that Nagesh was talking about, that we now see things from a single unified perspective, and then we can think holistically about what are we doing to help solve that problem. So if we focus too much on the how and the solution, we don't always see that. We just see a bunch of complex technologies tied together. So I think tying these things together, and both Stacy and Nagesh have mentioned that systems thinking ties the other disciplines together. So I think for me it always comes back to what are we doing for customers, what are we doing or what are we doing to make the world better if we want to think more holistically about the world, and then that tends to collapse a lot of the complexity and gives us a more consistent way to think about the system.
Actually, one last sorry, please go ahead, Stacey.
I was just going to say that I agree with Kurt. It starts to help us understand the complexity, but I think sometimes customers also don't know what they need. So I think even being sometimes close to the customer and hearing their ask isn't enough. It's watching how they work and really thinking of their work from a systems perspective so that you can help them weed through what the real need is, which again puts us back in that complex space.
All right, so we are actually at time. I'm really sorry to have to cut you guys off there, but I do want to thank you. Thank you so much for participating in the panel. Thank you, everyone, for listening to what we think about. We want to know also if this was helpful for you guys in terms of, here are some of the books we're reading, we're listening to, we're thinking about, here are some topics. And if these kind of panel discussions are helpful for you, please let us know. And obviously in the forum, you can pick up the topic there. If this was an interesting thing and you'd like to continue the conversation, that's a great way. Otherwise, we still have other Scrum Pulses and webinars and great places for you to learn. And if there are topics that are super interesting, you can also write us and perhaps we can start, giving you some blogs and more insights of what we've seen. So thank you again today. Thank you, Nagesh. I know you're going to a wedding tonight or tomorrow. Have a great time. Stacy, enjoy the view, and Kurt, talk to you later. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.